Our talk today, which is an offering of the Pranada Wellness Center, is called Seasons, Change, and Stillness, Awakening Health. Our speaker is Dr. Olixn Adams. Olixn is a board-certified practitioner of family medicine and practices holistic medicine at Southern Coos Hospital in Bandon, Oregon. He uses traditional osteopathic medicine when caring for his patients in the clinic, in the hospital, and in the emergency room. He's a faculty member of the Biodynamics of Osteopathy program and lectures internationally, teaching osteopathic medicine to physicians from around the world. Dr. Olixn Adams synthesizes the principles of ayurvedic medicine and osteopathic medicine to provide a deeper understanding of physiology, spirituality, and the wholeness of life as it pertains to health, healing, and well-being. I'm very excited to introduce him to you guys today. So without any further ado, I'll hand it over to Olixn. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. Good morning, everyone. Let us start with a short prayer. We can take a moment and remember God, gurus, and the spiritual masters. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Varitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Thank you. Feel free to share your view on the screen if you like. It's nice to see everybody's smiling faces. If you don't want to, that's okay, but it's fine. I love to see everybody. Good morning. It's nice. Hopefully seeing some of you in person soon. That'll be nice. And thank you, Rosa, for the beautiful introduction about Pranada Wellness Center, which is a new health initiative out of the Temple of Compassion. And Pranada, it means the giver of prana. And this year's program and healing retreat is coming up soon. It's going to be a good one. If you've been thinking about it, this is a good year to do it. We've got such a great team assembled. If I could participate in it, I would, because we've got so many great physicians and healers and support staff and cooks, and it'll be really, really nice. But we're here today to talk a little bit about healing, particularly healing in the season of the spring season. So at Pranada, we like to think of healing in a special way. We say healing is a movement to wholeness. So once we've arrived at wholeness, we're healed and we're well and we're whole. So any medicine is anything that supports that movement into wholeness. And spring is a really beautiful time to awaken within ourselves the intelligence and the energies that are always moving towards wholeness. It's a natural movement in the springtime. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna emphasizes how important the spring is. Krishna says, I'm the soul and the body, the mind and the senses, the eagle amongst birds, the lion amongst animals. Among the trees, I'm the Bodhi tree. And of the seasons, I'm the spring. Of the seasons, I'm the spring. So spring, in some traditions, is considered the king of the seasons. It's a time when there is a balance of the five elements. The five elements come into a perfect balance. And it's a time that the earth awakens. The earth has been asleep. The earth is a living, conscious organism that's breathing. And the breathing awakens in the springtime as the fire element begins to emerge into the foreground. Things begin to awaken and enliven and grow and move. So what we're interested in is, what does osteopathic medicine and what does Ayurvedic medicine teach us and share with us about this season? How to remain in balance during the season, how to come into contact with this vital force that's beginning to express and awaken and enliven. Both of these systems of medicine are both a science of healing, a science of living, and an art, a healing art. And the art of osteopathy and the healing art of Ayurvedic medicine comes first. And then the science actually emerges out of a deep observation of nature, a deep observation of the natural laws of healing, and a deep observation of the supernatural laws that govern the entire cosmos and the entire creation. So osteopathic medicine actually says that everything emerges out of and is organized around what we call a center point. And we're going to see that this center point and this emergence of life out of the center point is a pattern that can be observed everywhere in nature. And all of the forces of creation come into a very deep and beautiful balance in the springtime. So there's this center point for all of creation, and every function in creation has its own center point that's then related to the center point of creation. So the breath of life, which is breathing through everything, creating and sustaining, decides it's going to create a plant or a human or a tree or a dog or a cat or whatever is going to be created. And it starts with this little center point, and then the breath of life breathes through and creation emerges, and form and function begin to express themselves. I'd like to show a couple pictures that I think really demonstrate this principle nicely. If we go to we'll start with picture one. And picture one doesn't show anything. It's just a deep, dark stillness that this center point is going to emerge into. So let's go to picture two, Rosa. I think this is a really beautiful illustration of this principle of the center point. We see this plant is emerging, and everything is organized around this beautiful center, and everything is relating to the center. So the breath of life is breathing through this point, and form and function emerge out of it. If we go to the second picture, or the third picture, we see that not only is in nature, we see not only is everything emerging from a center point, but it emerges in a spiral-like pattern. And we'll see this pattern again and again throughout nature. And this pattern is really starting to express as we move into spring. And all of these plants are waking up and moving and evolving and growing and changing in a spiral pattern out of a center point. So this center point is actually encoded in our own growth and development from the moment of conception. If we go to the next picture, next one, the embryo has a center point that it grows out of. If we go to the next picture, and it actually grows in a spiral pattern from a center point. It grows out just like the plants, just like the flowers. There's this unfolding out of this center point, and that center point happens to be in the cave of Brahman, in the third ventricle, which we've talked about in previous lectures and presentations. So we see the center point in this spiral pattern throughout life, and it expresses a geometry, it expresses a precision, it expresses harmony, beauty, and balance. It's really beautiful. We can go back to the regular screen. So from a holistic point of view, all of the seasons are present all of the time. It's not like one season comes and another leaves. They're all actually balanced around this center point for the natural world. So summer is always there, spring is always there, winter is always there, but different elements and different aspects of that season are being expressed more in the foreground. For example, as we come into spring, the fire element starts to express out of the center point in a greater proportion. And so the winter begins to recede into the background, and the spring begins to proceed into the foreground, and eventually the summer begins to flow into the foreground. But it's all organized around a center point. So all of the principles are there all of the time. So what happens in the springtime? We start to get an expression of more fire. The fire element starts to come forth. Things start to warm up. The snow starts to melt. The water starts to warm. We get more evaporation, and what we end up with is more water in the atmosphere, and more water in the environment and in our inner environment, because the body, the soma, is a microcosm of the macrocosm. So the entire universe is contained within the soma. So as the earth begins to go through these changes, our bodies begin to go through the same changes in harmony with the natural world. So it's very important for us to pay attention to nature and listen to nature and watch nature, so that our lifestyle, our food choices, our activities can mimic and be in harmony with the seasons. Our diet is not supposed to be the same all year round. Our time of going to sleep, our time of waking up, our daily routines are not intended to be set in stone. They're intended to change and adapt with the seasons, with the stresses of life, and with the changing seasons. In osteopathic medicine, one of our hallmarks of health is the capacity or the ability to change and to adapt. So an organism and a mind and an energetic system that has the capacity to change and to adapt is much more healthy than a rigid organism and a rigid mind that can't change and can't adapt. So as the spring begins to emerge, we need to think about what changes do we need to make in our life and in our diet, in our daily routines, that will support and reflect what is going on in the natural world. So the earth is breathing, and it's breathing at a specific rate. in osteopathic medicine, we've recognized different rates that this prana is breathing and moving at. And one of the rates for the natural world is about 50 seconds for an inhalation and 50 seconds for an exhalation. And it's breathing, and there's this breath that's breathing through everything. And many, many spiritual traditions and many indigenous cultures speak about this breath that comes off of the horizon, passes through everything, and brings the meaning of the moment. It brings the entire direction for the moment. In some of the Aboriginal cultures in Australia, they tell us if they don't feel that wind, if they don't feel that breath, they become very depressed. And they have to stop, and they have to wait, and they have to listen until they can feel that breath again coming off the horizon and passing through everything. So in the springtime, we have an opportunity to come into deeper contact with this center point that we're talking about, the whole of creation is emerging from. We don't have to locate the center point because its function is everywhere. Now, what do I mean when I say that? Well, we've spoken before on some of our previous discussions and lectures that any function is bigger than its form. I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean by that. If we take a look at the heart, which is about the size of a grapefruit or about the size of your fist in the center of your chest, that's the size of the form. But its function, which is to circulate blood and to circulate prana and life force, is much, much bigger. You could say the function of the heart is to the whole entire body. So its function is much bigger than its form. If we look at the eyes are relatively small. We could even include the cerebral cortex, the back of the brain, which is the vision center. That's a relatively small space. But the function of the eyes is from your center all the way to the horizon at a minimum. At a minimum, our function for our eyes is from a deep center, which is still and silent, all the way to the horizon. So its function is much, much bigger than its form. That principle is going to carry throughout all of nature, all of the natural world. So this center point that we're talking about, its function is passing through all of creation. There's this deep silence. There's this deep stillness that's holding all of nature and all of the natural world. And it's available to us all the time if we listen for it. We really emphasize listening because listening is the most subtle and the most sensitive of all of the five senses. Each of the five senses is connected to its own element in the natural world. So the taste, the sense of taste, is connected to the element of water. And the sense of smell is connected to the element of earth, which is denser than water. The sight is connected to the element of fire. Touch is connected to air. And hearing and listening is connected to ether and space. It's the most subtle. And so when we listen, we're engaging actually all of the senses at the same time. We're receiving all of the information from the natural world and the five elements all at the same time. So when we teach young osteopathic physicians to work with their hands in evaluation and treatment, we teach them to actually listen with their hands, not to look with their hands, not to feel with their hands, but to actually listen with the hands. Because when we're listening to anything, we're actually beginning to understand its true essence. If you really, really want to understand something, we need to listen to it. And anything can be listened to. Anything that you want to communicate with, anything that you want to understand more deeply, just listen. You can listen to the plants, the animals, the natural world. So when you go out into the natural world, even if you're in the city and you go to the park, you begin to listen. Listen to the stillness that's holding the whole of creation. And it puts you in touch with this center point that we're talking about, because you're touching the function of the center point that then puts you in direct contact with this principle of life that the breath of life is breathing through. This is very, very accessible and much easier to contact at the change of the seasons, when everything comes into a beautiful balance and harmony. So during the springtime, we have this awakening of the earth. We have this awakening of the energies within our own form, within our own soma. And one of the primary energies that gets awoken is called Prana. In Ayurvedic medicine, there's five breaths, five major breaths, or five pranas. And one of the pranas, one of the breaths is called Prana, which is primarily the upward movement from the abdomen moving up. And so this prana begins to really awaken and enliven in the springtime, which brings forth inspiration, growth, development, and awakens more deeply our spiritual potential. And it's interesting, the element that's most awakening and most coming to the foreground in the springtime is the fire element. The sun is getting stronger, the heat is beginning to awaken. So the fire element is waking up and beginning to express. And the fire element is the only element that naturally rises. If you look at fire, if you look at a flame, its natural tendency is to rise. That's not true of the other elements. They don't rise in that natural way. So as this fire element in spring begins to express, we see this rising up throughout all of creation. The plants begin to rise and sprout. The buds begin to emerge on the trees. There's this whole manifestation of creation passing through everything that's creating an upliftment and an opportunity to awaken to a deeper state of consciousness and a deeper level of health. So how can we support this movement? Well, we can support it by thinking about what is the earth doing? What is the natural world doing? One thing we want to think about certainly is our diet. How does our food need to change? So in the springtime, we start to have more expression of water, and it's considered to be the kapha season in Ayurvedic medicine. So it's the time that we'll begin to have more phlegm. We'll begin to express more water. The stagnation of the winter begins to flow, begins to move. And we tend to see more illnesses and imbalances that involve water and phlegm in the springtime. People will get bronchitis, seasonal allergies, seasonal colds. In the hospital, we tend to see more congestive heart failure, more pneumonias, because people are getting out of balance with the water element. So in our diet, we want to begin to accentuate certain tastes. We want to accentuate more of the bitter taste, more of the astringent taste, and more of the pungent taste. And we want to really begin to reduce the sweet taste, because the sweet taste will produce more of the kapha dosha, more of the phlegm, more of the water, more of the earth element, while the pungent and the bitter will start to help bring into balance the excess phlegm that starts to get created and express more in the springtime. We want to really stay away from fried foods. Things that we can do in the springtime to really support our health: gargling with a little bit of salt and turmeric, about a teaspoon of salt and turmeric. If you gargle with that, it helps to clear some of the phlegm and some of the kapha that's being expressed in the throat. We want to increase the bitter, pungent, and astringent tastes. And we tend to want to increase our activity a little bit more, which is just a natural expression. This will help to get the circulation improving, which will help to eliminate some of the phlegm and the water and the kapha dosha that's trying to eliminate from the body at this time. So we want to wake up a little bit earlier in the morning than we do in the winter. In the winter, you might want to sleep a little bit later. In the spring, we want to start thinking about getting up earlier. We want to think about eating lighter meals. It's a good time of year to have a fast. Maybe one day a week is a good time to lightly fast in the springtime, to help the body to get lighter, to help the body to cleanse. This will really help prevent seasonal allergies and the seasonal colds that really tend to express in the springtime. Drinking some warm water with lemon and honey in the morning is excellent in the springtime. Or ginger tea. Drinking some ginger tea is excellent for purifying the blood, cleansing the blood, and activating the digestive energy, the digestive fire, the digestive agni, that will be useful in helping to burn and eliminate the toxins and absorb the nutrients. So those are some of the things that we can do in the springtime. I forgot to mention, if questions arise while we're talking, you can send them via chat to Rosa, and we'll, in a little bit, in a few minutes, we'll take some time to address any questions that people might have. So we've talked about some of the things that you can do in the springtime. One other, I think, really important one is gratitude. Gratitude really activates the prana energy that we were talking about. It really activates this upward motion. If you just take a moment and think of the things, 1, 2, or 3, or 4 things that you're really grateful for, and just really feel that gratitude, you'll feel this subtle activation of the prana in your body. You'll feel your heart to open. You'll feel this tingling and this warm sensation in the heart. And you'll feel the energy will naturally start to rise up into the higher centers. And so what's happening is we're bringing in a balance between the Ida and Pingala channels, and the Sushumna channel is able to open, and the river of life begins to flow right through our central channel through gratitude. So spring is a really, really good time to acknowledge the things that we're grateful for as new life begins to move forward. And we're grateful to have made it through another cold season of winter, and all of the energy that's been stored for winter and is now ready to express itself in the springtime will really get activated and expressed and released through gratitude. Gratitude is good anytime, all the time, but especially in the springtime, if we take a little time and just really notice what we're most grateful for, we'll begin to feel the river of life flowing through the Sushumna channel up into the higher centers of the brain, through the cave of Brahman, and out the fontanelle, expressing life, just like all these beautiful plants that are doing the same thing. So we've talked a little bit about some of the things to do in spring. We can mention a few things to avoid in the springtime to support our health and to be in harmony with the spring. We want to reduce the sweet taste, the sour taste, and the salty taste. Salt is going to cause us to hold on to the water that we're trying to eliminate. Sour taste in small amounts does reduce kapha and does reduce phlegm, but in higher amounts, it actually produces phlegm. So a person, for example, vitamin C actually expresses the sour taste. If people take a small amount of vitamin C, it's very healthy and very helpful, but large amounts over a long period of time actually will create more phlegm than it will reduce. If you want to reduce it even more, I would recommend liposomal vitamin C, which is a special form of vitamin C that's infused into the fat molecule. And so it's more bioavailable to the cell. So 1,000 milligrams of liposomal vitamin C might be equal to 5,000 or 6,000 milligrams of regular vitamin C. And it's much easier on the stomach, much easier to digest. So in the springtime, we want to reduce the sour taste a little bit and really reduce that salty taste. Time to stay away from the potato chips because they're fried and they're full of salt, and they're going to increase the kapha dosha, which is already on the increase through the spring season. So we want to support it to be able to express and eliminate without building up to too high of a level. Same with the sweet taste. And we want to stay away from the fatty foods and the fried foods. It's a good time of year to avoid snacking between meals. That's really generally a good rule in general, and unless you have a lot of fire in your constitution. If you have a lot of pitta, you may need some light, healthy snacks between meals to feed that digestive fire. In the springtime, we want to reduce that a little bit because we're trying to get a little lighter, and we're trying to pacify and harmonize this kapha dosha, which is the earth and water element. The kapha dosha is the synergy of kapha is the synergy of water and earth with the expression and the intelligence of nature passing through it. When those three functions come together, we call it kapha dosha, which is an expression of archetypal energy in our bodies and in the natural world. And Ayurvedic medicine has three primary doshas, the vata, the pitta, and the kapha, expressing how these elements come together and how they express in patterns in the world. Spring is a natural expression of the kapha dosha, And then we'll be moving into summer, which is the natural expression of the Pitta dosha. And we'll have to consider adjusting our diet and our lifestyle again. Another thing to avoid or reduce, or at least think about reducing in the spring season, is daytime sleeping. As funny as it might sound, summer might be a nice time to take a short nap. The springtime, actually napping increases the kapha dosha, daytime sleeping. So in the springtime, if you take a nap, you're going to produce more of that kapha energy, more of that water and earth element will be produced in your body. And the spring is a time that we're trying to reduce that a little bit so that we're in balance and harmony. And we want to stay out of cold drafts and cold air and air conditioning. Some places in the country, they get an early spring and it's starting to get kind of warm early and the air conditioners will come on. That's really hard on your health and your body to have that air conditioning too early in the season. So we want to keep the body warm during the kapha season, during the spring season. And so when does spring really start? Well, it's really regional. We have to really look at and pay attention to what's being expressed in our environment, because we could say traditionally by the calendar, March 21st is the spring equinox and the start of spring. If you're in the southern part of the country and it's a warmer climate, that might be earlier. And if you're in the northern part of the country, it might be a little bit later. Up in Maine, they may be thinking about spring more like late April or early May. So it's not by the calendar exactly, it's by where you are and watching nature. Getting out in nature and listening to it and watching it. That's a really good activity in the springtime, is to get out for a brisk walk in the morning, increase the activity a little bit more, and start to listen to nature and see what's expressing. And you'll know when spring has really arrived in your region and when to really start making these changes and these transitions to your meditation, your spiritual practice, your diet, your lifestyle, your activity, and your sleep. This will all put us into harmony with nature, which will enhance our health and reduce our susceptibility to illness. Nose drops are very nice in the spring season. There's some medicated oils that can be used in putting some drops of these oils in the nose. In Ayurveda, it's called Nasya therapy. The Ayurvedic Institute and Pranada Wellness Center sell a very nice formula called Super Nasya oil, really, really beautifully made formula. And you can put 3 or 4 drops of these drops into your nose. I might have some here that I can show you. Yes, I see some people have them. Wonderful. I'm not getting any financial gain by promoting this. I'm just sharing a really beautiful product created by Dr. Lad that you can use in the springtime, which will help reduce seasonal allergies. It helps clear the kapha out of the brain, the head and neck, and enliven that udana vayu energy that's moving up and through the subtle pranic channels, moving up and through the nerve channels and into the higher centers of the upper brain. And these spiritual centers in the cave of Brahman begin to awaken in the springtime, bringing a deeper spiritual life and insight. So, have we had some questions coming in?
Yeah, we do have a few questions in the chat. And if you can't use the chat function, feel free to, to raise a virtual hand if you know how to do that. If you have a question, we can unmute you too. So our first question in the chat is from Christine, and she's asking, can you review again the senses and 5 elements and how they are represented together?
Sure. So the whole of creation goes from subtle to dense. The breath of life breathes into creation, and it's very subtle, and it begins to create into more density. And the first thing that is created, the first element that is created, is the space element, or the ether, because all of creation has to be held in space. There needs to be space. So ether is created first in creation, from subtle to dense, and that's connected to hearing, to the sense of hearing. And then the next element that's created is air. And air is connected to touch, the sense of touch. From air is created fire. So fire is more dense than air. And fire is connected to sight, to seeing. It's interesting, a lot of systems of medicine recognize this connection between good vision and strong, healthy liver. And liver problems can often result in vision problems. And one of the organs that contains the most fire in the body is the liver. So this digestive fire is very, very strong in the liver. And when that gets out of balance, we see jaundice, and the skin turns yellow. We see more bile created, and the eyes turn yellow. The whites of the eyes turn yellow, and the vision gets very disturbed. And Chinese medicine has recognized this. Many systems of medicine have recognized this connection between liver health and vision health, and the fire that's present in the eyes for the transmutation of the prana that's coming in and transmutating that into an image that then can be recognized by the observer. And so in Ayurvedic medicine, it's recognized that the eyes are an organ of the pitta dosha, and a lot of care is taken to reduce that heat or regulate that heat. Without such regulation, if the heat becomes imbalanced, we can develop cataracts and glaucoma and vision problems. So fire, sight, and eyes. Then the next element that's created is the water element. And water is connected to taste. And then we have earth and the earth element, which is connected to smell. And so the earth element is the densest, and it's connected to the sense of smell. So these senses then are designed to bring the information of the external world through the prana back to the observer. And they go back in reverse order. So creation flows from subtle to dense. Then the information from the external world coming back to the observer goes from dense to subtle. So the first thing that we notice when we walk into a room is what? It's the smell. The smell is the first thing that we actually notice. And we train our physicians, we train our young physicians to be aware of all of these senses, because you can get a lot of information about the health of the patient through the smell. Diabetes has a smell. Pneumonia has a smell. Illness has a smell. Flu has a smell. Pneumonia has a smell. So when we walk into the room, the treatment room, or the exam room, or the hospital room, the first thing we pick up is the smell, and it tells us a lot about what's going on with the patient in the moment. And it will tell you a lot about what's going on in the room when you walk in. Then the next sense is the taste. So you notice if you don't have the sense of smell, this sense of taste gets reduced, because the sense of taste is dependent upon the sense of smell. And then we get back to the next subtle, is the sense of sight. And you can actually get a sense of what something is going to taste like by looking at it. Right? If you look at it, because sight is bringing with it scent, taste. So when you're looking at something, you're getting all of the information of the more dense elements plus the subtle element. And then when you touch something, you get a lot of information about it. You can almost, if your eyes are closed, you can get an idea of what it looks like. And then we said the most subtle element is listening. When we listen, we're getting the information of all of the 5 elements, of all of the 5 senses are coming to us all at once. And if we listen with the totality of our being, with the totality of who we are, with a deep listening, we actually awaken a 6th sense. There's a 6th sense, which is an intuitive, higher level of knowing that is involving all of the 5 senses functioning as a single unit. Because these senses really aren't made to function in isolation. That's not holistic. We're talking about holistic medicine here. Osteopathic medicine, ayurvedic medicine is holistic. Nothing functions in isolation. We don't heal in isolation. We heal in the context of the whole world, in the context of a community, which is why it takes a whole community really to heal. When you heal, your whole family heals, your whole society heals, your whole community heals. And it's much, much easier to heal in the context of a community, which is one of the beautiful things about the Pranada programs, is we come together as a group with the intention of healing and seeing the health and seeing the perfection in everyone. And this creates an augmentation. It creates a synergy, which makes everything stronger. So when we listen, deeply listen, we have all of the 5 senses activated at once. They come together as a single unit of function, and it awakens a deeper understanding, which is called the 6th sense, as in number 6. Nothing functions in isolation. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Olixn, for that answer. The next question on the list is a little question just about nausea and if it's safe for children to do nausea.
Yes, older children, I wouldn't recommend it for young babies, but as we get into 7, 8 years old, maybe 1 or 2 drops. An adult might take 5 drops in each nostril. A child could handle with 1 or 2 drops.
Next question is about someone dealing with shingles and severe nerve pain, facial nerve pain from the virus. 5 weeks into that, do you have suggestions for them?
So the shingles illness is coming through the nerve. And so generally it's an imbalance in, if we're to look at it from the 5 elements, there's too much heat and too much agitation in the nerve plexus that's feeding that particular region. So we want to introduce diet and food that is both reducing in heat, and we could say reducing the vata pitta dosha. So you would want a vata pacifying diet without aggravating pitta. So avoiding nightshades, avoiding spicy foods, and then looking at the foods that really support the vata dosha will help to soothe the nerve pathways and reduce the heat that is coming through, is something that can be easily done with the diet. Then we need to do soothe the nervous system. So making sure that the stress is reduced. Slow, gentle breathing. You can do the Soham breathing, or any slow, gentle, natural breathing will help to soothe the nervous system and making sure that the stress is reduced in the life. Lysine can be beneficial. Vitamin B12 can also be beneficial. Then if you have someone you can get a consultation with, more specific recommendations can be given based on your specific constitution. So without knowing the person and seeing them, we're trying to give some general recommendations that would be safe and balancing for all types of constitutions.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to pop in the chat again a link to sign up for the wellness retreat. If you have the ability to do that, anybody suffering from health conditions like this, I think it would be hugely beneficial. Our next question is about the AC, is about air conditioning. Can you speak a little bit about the constant dry air / air conditioning in the Western countries? In the South, India, they seldom use that.
Right. So the air conditioning, we're conditioning the air to suit our preferences, and we might over-condition it, which will create an imbalance. So air conditioning creates generally cold, dry air, which is going to aggravate the vata dosha. And when vata gets aggravated, it will also aggravate the kapha dosha. Kapha dosha is also aggravated by the cold. So when we blow cold air on our bodies, we'll have a tendency to activate more of the sympathetic nervous system. More of the vata dosha will get activated, and also aggravate a little bit of the kapha dosha. So in the springtime, we're trying to bring that kapha into balance, and blowing cold air on the body will actually aggravate this kapha. We want to try to keep the neck and the body warmer in the springtime. Even though it is getting warmer outside, the fire element hasn't expressed itself in its totality yet. So we need to try to stay warmer, or we're going to create aggravations in our nervous system. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't use air conditioning at all. Clearly, if you live in an environment that's 110 degrees in the summer, we need to cool the body in some way. But I find in many places, especially, for example, when I go to Arizona, I have to take a jacket with me in the summertime whenever I go to a public location, because they cool the air so much. I find it creates an imbalance for me in my body. So I try to stay a little bit warmer to try to be in harmony with what nature is expressing, rather than make such a drastic change between the external and the internal environments.
Beautiful. Thank you. The next question is about sinusitis, ways to heal that. Sinusitis.
Sinusitis.
Yes.
So sinusitis is a fancy word for inflammation of the sinuses. Anything that has itis at the end implies inflammation. Inflammation almost always involves heat, aggravation of the nervous system. So again, we need to bring the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system into balance. The Ida and Pingala channels, in other words, need to come into balance. And we need to support the liver. If you have seasonal allergies or chronic sinusitis, often there's a lot of congestion in the liver. And so the liver is having difficulty keeping the blood clean, and the digestive fire becomes compromised, and we're unable to digest the food as completely as it should be digested. We then have undigested proteins circulating through the blood, and the immune system begins to pick up on these undigested proteins, creating an inflammatory response. And so the immune system begins to get a little bit overreactive. And now when the pollen starts to blow in the springtime, we tend to overreact to the pollination because the immune system is already overactive. The blood isn't as clean as it could be, and the liver is congested. And so congestion begins to build up on every front. We begin to create more phlegm. So to support sinusitis, these Supernastia drops are very helpful for soothing the sinuses. I wouldn't recommend using them if you're having a severe attack and the sinuses are congested with any type of infection acutely. We want to wait till that has passed before putting any type of oil into the sinuses. But if we're not having an acute flare-up, these nose drops, this oil is very soothing to the sinus membranes. Then we want to support the liver with some bitter foods. Turmeric is a bitter spice, bitter melon, Brussels sprouts, dandelion, any foods that you know and you like that are supportive and cleansing to the liver are very, very important in the springtime, especially if you develop seasonal allergies or chronic sinusitis. And also we want to support the nervous system. If the nervous system is agitated or overstimulated, it's going to push or drive all of the physiologic responses in the body. So there's two nervous systems in the body. There's a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is what's commonly known as fight or flight, and parasympathetic is rest and digest. In Ayurveda, we have the Ida and Pingala nerve channels, and the right side of the body is the Ida channel, and the left side is the Pingala channel. The right side is the masculine and the fire energy. And when it gets overly activated, it activates the sympathetic nervous system, and every single cell in the body has a fiber responding to the sympathetic nervous system. Every single cell. So when the Vata dosha gets aggravated or the sympathetic nervous system gets agitated, which is essentially saying the same thing, every single cell in the body is going to respond to that. So any stress is going to push every physiologic activity in your whole body. So if you have chronic sinusitis, especially in the springtime, it becomes really important to begin recognizing where the stresses are in your life, how to reduce the stress, how to support the nervous system to come into balance. And then reducing foods that create phlegm, such as dairy, fried foods, and supporting the liver. We're going to just keep coming back to liver support. If there's sinus conditions, liver support is really, really important. Some people develop a lot of sinus problems in the springtime when that kapha dosha begins to express. So all of the things we talked about earlier of reducing the kapha dosha. And then as we move into summer, we start to express more of the heat and the fire and the pitta. Then we get the seasonal allergies with the eyes burning and the burning sensations, because now we've added the heat on top of the water. So at that point, then we're needing to look at the inflammatory and heat producing foods like the nightshades and the spices, spicy foods. Support your liver, get plenty of rest, stay away from the fried foods, reduce the milk and the dairy, support the sinuses with Supernacia oil. And this will help. Liposomal vitamin C, 1,000 milligrams or so a day. And there's another one, quercetin, is something that helps to stabilize the mast cells, which are releasing all of the histamines, which is driving all of this water and phlegm. So quercetin, I think it's QUER, about 500 milligrams a day in the spring season will help also. And as always, you can get with a practitioner and have things more specifically tailored to your specific constitution and imbalances.
Beautiful. Thank you, Olixn. Do you have time for another question?
Yeah, we've got some time for a couple more questions.
Okay. So Gustavo asks, in Bogota, we have almost all 4 seasons in a day. How do we adopt our diet and other healthy habits to accommodate?
Well, you're lucky. You get to you get to start breakfast with the kapha diet and then have lunch with this. So everywhere on the planet does express the seasons. It might be just a little bit more or a little bit less. If you're right on the equator, you're not going to see so much variation. You're going to have to look at what nature is expressing and go with a tridoshic diet, or a diet that brings your particular constitution into the greatest level of balance. Yeah, if you're close to the equator, there's very little variation, but almost everywhere except for right on the equator has a little bit of variation. And some of the areas that are subtropical actually express 8 different seasons. So the 4 seasons get even more refined, which is a conversation for another time. I would say for now, just try to notice the subtleties of the change. It's much more subtle, but it's there.
Beautiful, thank you. Next, we have Bonnie asking, do you have an alternative recommendation for people who say that some of the herbs in Supernacia are too strong for them?
Yeah, there's some other Nacia drops. There's, was it ghee? Brahmi ghee? What's that one called, Rosa?
Brahmi ghee Nacia. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's Brahmi ghee Nacia, which is very gentle and soothing. And there's many medicated Nacia drops. So you can look online and pick another one, but Brahmi ghee is a great one for people that are sensitive to the camphor and the the smells of the Supernacia drops.
Next, we have Patty asking for suggestions for sleep when dealing with pain.
For sleep when dealing with pain. So sleep can be difficult when there's pain. And so we want to try to find the position that's greatest ease to reduce that pain, and not to worry about what position we're sleeping in, but finding the position that's the most ease. And I would then take the attention to the breath and watch the breath and watch the inhalation and exhalation without trying to change it, but just watch this natural breath that's coming and going. And as we're watching the breath come and go, begin to listen and acknowledge the stillness that the breath comes from and returns to, and really start to appreciate the stillness that's holding the breath as we're watching it. And no effort to change the breath, just watching each inhalation as it comes and each exhalation as it recedes back into the stillness. This will begin to allow the mind to move out of the gross body and come into contact more with the subtle body that's responding to the subtle breath, the same breath that the earth is breathing with. So there's this gross breath of the movement of the air, and there's this subtle breath of the prana that's happening all the time. So we begin to listen and watch the breath and notice that every breath is different. So no two breaths are the same. Each breath has its own volume, its own shape, its own tempo, its own rhythm, its own rate. Every breath is unique and special. And really appreciate and love your breath. Love that each breath is special and unique in the moment, bringing you a vitality and a medicine that's unique to that moment. You don't have to try to change it. You just want to watch and appreciate that. Once you have a sense of the breath, then listen to the stillness and really synchronize with the stillness that the breath is receding into, and see if that doesn't help reduce the pain and allow the sleep to come more naturally. Thank you for that question, and I hope you find some restful sleep, and you can send Pranada an email if that's helping, or if you want more direction about that. We talk a lot about breath at the Pranada Wellness Centers. We spend a lot of time looking at what a normal conscious breath is and how to support that process.
Thank you, Olixn. Do you have time for another question?
Yeah, we have till 5 more minutes. Mm-hmm.
Great. From Satori, any suggestions on supporting spleen health? They say they suffer from too much fire in the liver, and due to virus activations, and they do practice pranayama, yoga and meditation and food restraint, but they need a little more help dealing with spleen.
So sometimes in the liver, congestion develops, and the fire that's in the liver needs to express itself. And so it has to move, it becomes displaced. So the metabolism actually has to shift. The whole metabolism has to shift to accommodate the imbalance. Any symptom isn't a disease. A symptom is an expression of the organism to create and maintain balance. So any symptom is actually a communication from the natural world about our state of balance and our way to restore the balance. So sometimes if we have too much heat in the liver, there's too much congestion, and the fire gets displaced, it will move to the stomach and to the spleen. So sometimes supporting the liver is the best support for the stomach and the spleen. That would best be addressed a little bit more specifically to know for sure through the pulses and through the evaluation of the fluids in the body and the subtle energies that are flowing through the body, which is done through osteopathic medicine and ayurvedic medicine. then can begin to evaluate what is causing this movement of heat from its natural location to a location that it wouldn't normally rest and reside. We want to find a gentle way to restore that balance that allows it to slowly come back into harmony. So probably looking at foods that reduce the heat, pranayamas that don't create too much heat but are more of the cooling pranayamas, and taking the stress off of the system. So generally, there's an overactivity in the immune system. There's heat building in the liver, heat building in the blood. And so we want to find ways to help reduce the heat through the diet or through the herbs or through the medical therapies or the hands-on treatment of the osteopathic treatments.
Thank you. Let's see, we have one question about a talk that you gave in the past about breath. They want to know where they can find it. I'm going to put in the chat a link to the YouTube channel for Pranada Wellness. I believe if there was a talk Olixn gave, it should be there. And it looks like we're about at that time where we're gonna wrap up Q&A. One last little question I see here asking if Kriya Pranayama is cooling. I'm curious if you have an answer, quick answer for that.
Kriya Pranayama is actually balancing. If you pull up, I think if we pull up that last picture we have, no, picture 8. If you don't have access to it, we'll just describe it. But if you have access to, can you pull up picture 8? Can we see that? I can't see anything.
Why don't you begin talking? I'll find it and we'll pull it.
All right, well, the pause is nice. The silence is good too. So we have the Ida and Pingala channels rising up, and they come into contact at each of the centers, each of the chakras. As we come up, they actually come into contact. And Kriya Pranayama actually begins to bring the Ida and the Pingala channel into balance, and it actually begins to create just a little bit of space between those contact points in each center, which allows a balance between the heating and the cooling, and allows the breath then to begin to express through the Sushumna and the central channel. I think we'll have our picture now. There we go. So on the right side, we see the Pingala, and the right side, the left side, the Ida channel. And we see where they're touching at each of the 7 centers. The Kriya Pranayama brings both of those channels into balance and creates just a little bit of separation at that central channel, which allows for the breath then to pass through the Sushumna and the central channel. So now we have thoracic respiration, our breathing actually subtly passing through between those 2 channels, and the breath of life, Krishna Prana, can flow freely between those 2 channels. This creates a perfect balance and harmony between the Ida and the Pingala, which brings the heat and the cool, the sun and the moon, the masculine and the feminine, into a deeper level of balance while harmonizing each of those 7 centers. So it's a excellent pranayama for health and balance and restoration. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Mudra tends to be a little bit heating. For those that are doing Kriya practice, Mahamudra is a little more heating. Excellent to do more Mahamudra in the springtime. And sun salutation, very nice to do a little more sun salutation in the springtime. These will both activate this, support this uprana, this rising of the prana and harmonization in the heat that will help to counteract the dampness of the spring in the kapha dosha. That's a nice, beautiful question. Any other questions before we wrap up?
There are a few more that came through.
Okay.
One was about taking Triphala for integral health. Can we take Triphala for integral health? That's the question.
Oh, I love Triphala. Yeah. Triphala is the 3-flower remedy. Triphala means 3 flowers. And it's also called the elixir of life. And it's made from Bibitaki, Haritaki, and Amalaki in equal proportions. And it's very gentle and cleansing. It supports the liver, supports good elimination, cleans the blood, excellent in the springtime. Most people find it to be slightly a laxative. A few people, depending on their imbalances, may find it slightly constipating. That's very rare. But if the ones that find it constipating, we can adjust the ratio of the 3 flowers to fit the constitution. I find Triphala it has a positive effect on about 98% of people, and then there's a few people that they need a little bit of adjustment to the formula, but it's beautiful for the springtime. Supports the liver, cleanses the blood, helps the digestion, and it's an expression of the flowers which are expressing in the spring. It's made from 3 flowers, so it's a beautiful spring time herb and remedy.
Thank you. There's just one last little question. Do you have time for it?
Sure.
Okay. Any suggestions for a toddler dealing with constipation? 2.5-year-old.
Toddler with constipation, get them on a vata pacifying diet for sure. 2 years old, they're probably not breastfeeding, so we won't go into that. But when we have infants that are breastfeeding, if mom is constipated, the infant will be constipated. So usually if I have an infant that's constipated, I'll treat mom's constipation first, because the breast milk is going to be highly influential on the infant. At 2 years old, they're probably not breastfeeding. So we want to eliminate dry foods, salty foods, raw foods, and we want to, you can go and look up vata pacifying diet and increase a little bit of the ghee, increase a little bit the oil, increase the fruits. Warm prune juice can be very beneficial for children with constipation, as long as you warm it up and don't give it cold. Rubbing some sesame oil on the abdomen or full body sesame oil can be very helpful. Adding a little bit of oil to the food is helpful. And then if they're seeing us in the clinic, we're providing an osteopathic treatment. We're providing a hands-on treatments to balance out these 5 breaths and the normal flow of the prana, which will help to reduce the constipation. A gentle massage with some oil to the feet into the low legs will help to stimulate the downward flow of the prana, which is the aprana. And so a gentle massage will bring some stimulation to support that energy in that motion. Usually it's somewhere in the diet. For some children, a lot of dairy will cause more constipation. Some children are eating too much cheese. Look in the ears if there's a lot of earwax. Often they're not digesting the dairy as well as they should, and they will have either sinus congestion, ear infections, or constipation. The earwax is an expression of an imbalance in the metabolism and the digestion at the rasa and rakta dhatu level, at the level of the blood. And that sometimes gets weakened and they can't digest the dairy and the cheese so well. And then you see more earwax.
Beautiful. I think that's probably all the time we have for questions. So maybe you can talk a little bit about the spring retreat before we close up today.
So Pranada Wellness Center is having their annual spring retreat the last week of March. Registration deadline is in the next couple of days. So if you're interested, you'll need to get on and get registered. As I said at the beginning, we've got a really great team. 5 phenomenal physicians who I received treatment from myself, all 5 of them. 2 excellent Shirodhara practitioners. You'll be receiving osteopathic treatment and consultation, which is hands-on balancing of the 5 pranas and all of the tissues, and Shirodhara treatments, which will support a balance in the nervous system. It'll deepen our spiritual practice. It'll bring about a deep level of relaxation. We'll also have yoga asanas, regular meditations, beautifully cooked. We've got a really good team of in the kitchen this year with a lot of experience in cooking and preparing sattvic balanced tridoshic meals. It's open to anyone this year. The previous ones have been only for Kriyavans. This year, you do not have to be a Kriyavan to participate. It's at the Temple of Compassion on 108 acres with the Brahmin cows. The environment is healing in itself. The ashram, just being on the ashram grounds is deeply healing, even if there's not a healing retreat going on. So it's a really great opportunity to go into deeper levels of healing, deeper sadhana, deeper meditation, learn how to create better balance in your life with diet, food, exercise, lifestyle. We'll have classes and lectures about creating balance from an ayurvedic perspective and an osteopathic perspective, daily routines for meditation and for health and wellness. I hope to see some of you there. Yeah.
And tell your friends, like Olixn said, this is the first time we're opening this up to non-Kriyavans, and I know we all have people in our life who could really benefit from an experience like this. So tell them about it, share it. The deadline again is March the 1st, so it's coming up.
Very good. Do you want to close us with a prayer, Rosa?
Yeah, I'll just say a mantra, and I'm just bowing to Olixn for giving so generously of your knowledge, for all the masters that support us all, for all of you being here. Thank you so much. And please reach out if you have any questions about the retreat or about anything. We're here for you. We love you. Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanan Mrityurmukshiyamamritat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone. Be well.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to see everyone.